Alright, so I want to do a bit of a mini review of Season 1, and then I also want to do a bit of a deeper dive in patch notes for the Season 1 patch and kind of discuss the issues with it. There will be, a timestamp for that if you want to skip to the Season 1 patch discussion. So let's go ahead and talk about the season itself. First, I want to talk about my build, because your build is a big determining factor of how much you're going to enjoy the game. Now, I am playing a variant of the old Earthenborg build using the new Poison Creeper aspect, and it's a blast. It's really, really strong. It absolutely stomps, and it's a lot of fun. It just feels really good to play. I'm enjoying myself quite a bit ever since I got the build set up. Now, before I got the build set up, obviously, Druid leveling is still pretty ass. It's not fun, and it sucks. But once I finally got the symbiotic aspect to drop, and I got shifted over to my actual build, I started having a ton of fun. I'm really enjoying the game now, after I got my build actually up and running. Now, as for the seasonal mechanic itself, as a druid, I think kind of the Malignant Hearts are on the boring side anyways. Maybe if I was playing a Necromancer, I'd feel different, but right now, I can't say I'm particularly impressed by the seasonal mechanic. It's kind of whatever, right? It's nice, extra bonus, but that's about it, pretty much. Now, for the new balls, honestly, just kind of feels way too easy. I haven't gotten to fight the Uber version yet, but I've seen some other people fight him, and they seem to just absolutely stomp him. Varshan just seems to be pretty squishy, pretty easy in general. So not kind of boring from that perspective. I would like to see him get buffed. If I'm being honest, the fight just feels way too easy. So yeah, and that's pretty much my thoughts on Season 1. I'm enjoying my build. The game is slowed down a bit, of course, which sucks, but I'm a pretty casual. I describe myself as like a casual hardcore player. I enjoy min-maxing, I enjoy theory crafting, but I play these kind of games at a pretty slow pace, because that's how I enjoy playing them, right? And I'm not going to like compromise how I enjoy playing video games in order to push out videos. I've been playing at my own pace, and I've been enjoying myself. I've been having a good time. None of the, core issues of the game have really been addressed, but the basic gameplay is still fun, and I love me some brain dead grinding. And that's pretty much my thoughts on Season 1. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Season 1 patch, because it was an absolute disaster, of course. Now, if you are a very casual player who only does like same level content or Nightmare Dungeons a couple levels above you, probably didn't even really notice it and don't understand, and may not understand why people are making such a big deal about it, or were making such a big deal about it, especially with the Nightmare Dungeon nerfs that they have hotfixed in. Obviously have addressed a lot of the complaints, because if you were doing same level, casual, easy content, you probably didn't notice the nerfs, because you didn't really need that good of a build to kill same level content or enemies only 3 levels above you, right? The issue became with especially the vulnerable nerfs when you were, and I guess also the survivability nerfs to a lesser extent, but offense is the best defense, of course. And the issue was when you were trying to push higher tier Nightmare Dungeons. And now, again, they have rolled out the Nightmare Dungeon nerfs that significantly nerf the higher tier Nightmare Dungeons, especially, it's a scaling nerf at level, the tier 1 Nightmare Dungeons got almost no changes at all, like a very tiny, like 2% nerf. But at tier 100, Nightmare 100 got a 82% HP nerf and a 79% damage nerf. Basically an 80% nerf at the tier 100. Obviously, the intention here seems to be that they don't want tier 100 to be beating the game, right? Just to be a way to grind glyph XP and to grind XP in general, of course. And after the changes, the nerfs don't feel quite as bad, but obviously the issue with the nerfs was never so much, us doing less damage. The issue was the way the nerfs were applied, right? Because what they basically did was nerf vulnerable damage and crit damage a little bit. But because of the way the game works, if you don't know, the game has essentially damage buckets, as people like to describe them. And these are your separate multipliers. So you've got your core, your basic damage. That's all your generic damage stats, like, you know, core damage, basic skill damage, damage to bleeding enemies, stuff like that. That's your basic damage, right? Your core basic damage. And then you've got your critical hit damage, which is its own separate damage bucket that multiplies that, your basic damage. And then you've got vulnerable damage, which is also its own separate damage multiplier bucket, which also multiplies all of that. So you've got these two multipliers here that are completely separate from everything else, critical damage and vulnerable damage. So if you nerf either of those and they nerf both, it's actually a bit more of a nerf than it seems like, right? It's because they're multipliers, they multiply. So it's a bigger nerf than it seems, and the nerf was actually very significant. But they didn't really, they buffed some basic damage numbers a really small amount. The change is basically worthless, right? To the basic damage. And the issue here is that nothing changed. All the best builds were still the best builds. And essentially all that happened was like the low and mid tier builds just got really, really bad. And the best builds just got a little bit worse. Effectively, right? Is all that really happened. And it shows the way they did the nerf feels like a lack of understanding from the developers on how the basic game functions. And, you know, they designed the game, they should understand it, but it didn't feel like it from the patch notes, right? And also, I feel like the dev comment that was with those changes kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It definitely rubbed me the wrong way. And, you know, they're basically like, too many people are playing the game the way we designed it to be played, so get nerfed, fuck you, is how the developer comment kind of felt in regards to the vulnerable changes, right, and the critical damage changes. Was kind of how it felt. Like, how dare you play the game we designed it to be played, right? Because inherently critical damage and vulnerable damage are just the best stats. By default, that's the way the game is designed. So they can't exactly be mad at players for playing the game the way they designed it, right? And that's how it felt. Now, they do seem, after the fireside chat, to, in hindsight, understand why the patch was bad and why the changes they made were bad. That said, it doesn't exactly give me a lot of confidence, because I don't feel like, because, you know, here's the thing, it almost felt like they wanted to do a stat squish, and they kind of did it the wrong way. But they wanted to do an overall game stat squish, but they only gave us half of the stat squish at first, right? They gave us the player half of the stat squish. And then, you know, a couple days later, after tons of backlash, they gave us the enemy content portion of the stat squish, right? I feel like if they had released them at the same time in the same patch, probably would have gone over quite a bit better. Still would have had the criticism of the patch not really changing anything, but at least it wouldn't have felt so bad right off the rip, right? Now, that said, up until now, things have generally been pretty positive overall up until the Season 1 patch. And it's the only reason I'm really willing to give them any benefit of the doubt at all, is because things did seem to be on a positive, you know, positive path in the base game. They seem to be listening to feedback. They seem to be making decent changes for the most part. And then the Season 1 patch happened. And it was rough, of course. So we'll have to wait and see if they really are going to do better, of course. And yeah, that's basically how I feel about it. We just have to wait and see. And it is what it is. But I'm skeptically hopeful, skeptically optimistic for the future of the game. I'll leave it at that. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll catch you guys in the next video.